Yang berhormat Saudara Siang, Saudara Jimmy, my friend Dr. Chong and Leong, Saudara Peter. Of all the issues, I have to admit this is one that it's not really my subject matter. There are many issues usually which I pick up, which I have quite an in-depth knowledge of, or figures and facts of what happens. But certainly the very complicated and long-drawn problems of parti pendatang asing tanpa izin in Sabah is not something which I can claim that I have a full knowledge of. But I think nevertheless, any Malaysian, if you have some rational thinking left in you, you would be able to see the evidence and discrepancies on the ground to be able to make some conclusion about what is wrong in Sabah now. Yeah? I'm sure Dr. Chong and Leong will highlight. I'm a number figure, I'm an accountant, so I usually go for the number first. There is no state in this country, and most probably in anywhere in the world, which have seen a dramatic increase in the number of population the way that Sabah has seen. It's roughly about 300% over a period of 3 decades. But 300%, you know. I don't think Sabahans procreate that much. I don't think, you know, my hats off to Sabahans, but I don't think it's, you know. If you compare the average growth of population elsewhere in Malaysia, definitely is a lot lower than that. You know? So anyone with a slight intelligence would have told you need to be able to explain the dramatic 300% increase in population over that short period in comparison to the rest of the country. If you cannot explain it, therefore you cannot simply write off and dismiss this issue about illegal immigrants. I think over the last 2 or 3 decades as well, there have been various testimonies given under oath in courts and under different bodies and agencies with strong evidence that there were allegedly some kind of operations to give temporary ICs or ICs in exchange for political loyalty. There has one celebrated one is a testimony given by Dato' Hasna, and I personally know him, and I personally see some of his work. So in the presence of the testimonies given by these people who previously used to be part and parcel of the very machinery that recruited and processed the citizenship application of Filipinos and other people. Again, if you have a shred of intelligence in you, you cannot just simply dismiss it. And then we have had that too in 2013. In a way, one should really look in details about what happened in Lahad Datu, and you would understand how a lot of Sabahans actually hold dual citizenship, or you know, they may be Filipino today crossing the straits, and the next day they can come back and they are Sabahans. The incidents of Lahad Datu, by right, you know, for people who really want to understand what's going in Sabah, by right would have the evidence would have staring at us that this phenomenon exists on day-to-day basis. People from Filipino will go back to Filipino and become Filipino, and then they will come back and become Sabahans. But I think I went through it myself because we were campaigning in some of the elections, in Batu Sapi, for example. I did go house to house, and I did meet voters. I did sit down with them, and I did go through their own stories about how they came from, where they were coming, and how they do not like Lian, but they fear their IC and so on, and how they feel that they are beholden to Lian because of the citizenship. So that's why I think no matter what people say, if you are a patriot and you really care about what's happening in the country, one has to start with acknowledging that this is beyond politics. What happens in Sabah, although to Muslims and Malays it's extremely easy to blur the whole issue with Muslims against non-Muslims, because the argument used in Sabah is that the whole thing is important, even if it were to have existed, it is important. Sorry, someone must have cursed me. That must be the IGP, because I've been cursing at the IGP on Twitter, so he must have answered back. So this whole narrative, even this whole narrative about such an operation, if it had existed, was necessary to maintain a balance so that Muslims become majority in Sabah. It's easy for UMNO or whoever to keep harping on this, but anyone who has a concern about where our country is going must look beyond politics, because the whole issue of citizenship in Sabah, it is beyond politics. If you fall back to Lahad Datu, it's very clear that the security concern is something that will crop up and happen over and over again. It's been 2 years. I get a bit sick and tired every parliamentary session, because you have a few of the UMNO MPs cursing at their own UMNO ministers for the kind of lack of security in Sabah. You can create whatever ESCOM, PCOM, I don't know, whatever you can give any names for it. But if you don't go down to the root cause of it, and part of the root cause is this porous movement of people, and part of it is because of the dual citizenship, obviously you're not going to solve that problem. And every now and then we will hear Malaysia will make headlines in the world because every now and then someone got kidnapped and people will be asking for ransom. This is a real security concern. Even if you are a minister here or an MP here with no connection whatsoever in Sabah, but once in a while, if it were to happen, the whole Malaysia is threatened. And no one in their right mind would tolerate a situation where a security of your country, no matter how far it is from you, is always under constant threat. So it's beyond politics, it is an issue of security, and I think it is important for us to reframe the whole citizenship issue in Sabah beyond just politics, but also on, we have a delegation of MPs. The second issue related as well to security is of course the question of sovereignty. It's a mockery to claim that Malaysia is a country, is a sovereign country, if every now and then there can be excursions into your territory. And that area of Sabah, which is the east coast of Sabah, furthermore, is extremely strategic and volatile, because at the southeast of that geographical area is where Ambalat is. And Ambalat remains a hotly contested basin with a high prospect of petroleum. If you have a continuous security concerns over that border, that means that you will have a continuous problem with sovereignty, which means that over time you will have a continuous problem with claims to resources such as the highly contested Ambalat. So I'm trying to represent and repackage the whole citizenship issue so that people do not see that this is just Sabah versus Semenanjung, Kadazan versus the Malay, Muslim versus the non-Muslims. It is a much bigger issue if only one looks beyond the stereotypes that is presented over the last 2-3 decades. And of course, if you go to Sabah on the ground, if you drive in Kota Kinabalu now, Sandakan, you will notice the economic problems manifesting itself on the ground. It is quite common, I think, in Likas or in KK, where if you drive and if you stop at the traffic light, there will be people, beggars coming at your car. It's not common in KL, anywhere in Semenanjung, but it is getting quite common in Sabah. And this is because, the economic problems and the citizenship given so easily that does not come with so-called economic rights, so to speak. And if you give and if you allow too many to come in at a particular time, and so much so that the population has grown so much, obviously the growth, the economic growth, cannot keep up with the population growth. And when that happens, you start seeing this on the ground. And it will spawn even more problem, when too big a population had to contest for a very limited economic resources at the microeconomic level, then you would have marginalized group and so on and poverty. That's happening in Sabah. And together with that, then it will create another set of problems, which is the social problems. Poverty will spin off another set of problems, social problems, lack of education, children leaving schools at standard 6 or even earlier, and committing or getting involved with crimes and so on. So all this, if it is not managed properly, Sabah can be a ticking time bomb in a matter of time. Because such a society where you have very limited resources, a population boom, unclear program, such animosity and anxiety, deep-seated over time, obviously is the kind of recipe that can create havoc in a society. Amno doesn't like me because they always say that I'm a scaremonger, and they say that I always slander them. Today, I can categorically say I did not slander Rosmah and Najib because they did buy a new private jet. But if you are in our position, and if you have looked at the track record of Malaysian government over the last 60 years, I think it's more prudent to be on the cautious side. Do not wait until some hiccup or some problems happen like the one that had taken place in Lahad Datu, then you start doing EXCOM and so on. The Lahad Datu problem is a manifestation of these 2 or 3 decades worth of problems that were not looked into. In the same way, I think, the whole concoction of all the problems and the factors I mentioned just now is creating a ticking time bomb. If you are not careful, is a social disaster and will compel and always put Sabah way far behind other states in the Federation in spite of the resources. That's why I think, because this has happened in Sabah, and you know that the propensity of the ruling regime of Barisan Nasional to hang on to power with whatever means and trickery that they can have, I think eventually you will start seeing the same thing happening elsewhere. In Selangor, in Terengganu, in Pekan. If you go to Pekan, there will be one big kampung, and you go and ask people in Pekan, Pahang, they will all say all those people were the Kampucheans, the Cambodians, who were given citizenship. There were about 3,000 of them. In my hometown of Kemaman, I come from Kemaman, Terengganu. before I stood in Pandan, some people were trying to get me to stand in Kemaman against Sabahan. But you know, one thing in Kemaman, there is one kampung, about 3,000 of them were previously Myanmar. They were brought here and eventually they went through and they become Malaysians. So what had happened in Sabah obviously can happen anywhere else in Malaysia if we continue to treat that is a Sabah problem and is detached from the rest of the country. And that's why it requires a reframing of the whole issue, both in Sabah as well as in elsewhere in Malaysia, in Semenanjung, so that I think people look beyond that this is not a unique Sabah problem. And the way that it has been done in Sabah, with you know, with an operation, with a very distinct methods, it could have been replicated very easily elsewhere in the country as well. That's why, you know, while I was a bit elated initially when they announced the Royal Commission, but I think it was wishful thinking if you expect the Royal Commission to resolve a problem in the country the way the Royal Commission does elsewhere else. We have had so many Royal Commission. We even had a Royal Commission to improve the police forces. I think it's what, almost 10, 12 years later, in fact the quality of the police went down. You know, we have not seen much of the recommendation of any Royal Commission have been implemented so far. But of course, the report on the RCI, which I'm sure Dr. Chong and Leong will elaborate even further after this, basically take the whole mockery of Royal Commission to a new level. For a start, although it was a Royal Commission, everyone was complaining, Jimmy was complaining to me, there's nowhere of the word royal there. In fact, people now doubt the authenticity and the veracity of the report itself. We have a big problem when a Royal Commission established to look into this problem is doubted by the very people that you know, has been expecting the Royal Commission for a long while. And that's why I was not surprised that BN refused to bring the Royal Commission to Parliament today. Even until today, there has been a lot of exchanges about why the refusal, why did BN refuse to bring the Royal Commission to debate in Parliament? After all, we debate even smaller things in Parliament, you know. Teresa has always been the butt of BN's focus on the video, Rosma video, for example. It can drag for a very long time. If they can spend time on that, you know, at the very least, one day of debate on the report of the Royal Commission would have been warranted. But until today, BN refused to bring it to Parliament. And if you go through the report, just flip through the report very quickly, you will understand why they refused to do that. Because you would have expected any Royal Commission into something like this would have at least answered a few key questions. It would have answered how many out of the population are genuine citizens, how many were given citizenship, but perhaps if they had gone through the normal citizenship processing as in accordance to the Constitution would have been given citizenship, and how many who would not have qualified at all. That, to my knowledge, Dr. Chong and Leong, was not answered. We would have wanted to know who was responsible for it. If it's called Project Mahathir, Project IC, was Mahathir really responsible for it? We would have wanted to know, the report should have answered that. We would have wanted to know what action can be taken against those people who were responsible in the first place. And the real questions that we are yearning for the answer is what are the solutions and remedies for the problem so that we can resolve this issue. None of it, I think, has been tackled or managed or answered adequately in the report. That's why I think, if I can conclude now, even after the Royal Commission of Inquiry, what we have now is more questions rather than answers. I do not think that the Royal Commissions of Inquiry brings us closer to the closure of the issue or the solution to the issue. In fact, it almost agitates Sabahans even more so, that they had to wait this long, and out of it, you have a report that the end even refused to bring to Parliament, and therefore it didn't have much legitimacy to begin with. And that's why it is important, I think, for the whole Malaysians now to reframe the issue, refocus, and repush. Because that's what BN does every now and then. When you complain too much about one MDB, what they will announce is a national audit report. What can you expect in 2 years down the line? A national audit report which they refuse to bring to Parliament, because it hardly contains anything. I remember the last time when we were hammering on NFC, in fact, BN and ministers kept on repeating on Aegis certification that there was nothing wrong with NFC. So you would expect the same thing. So it's a standard modus operandi of BN that when they cannot answer, they will ask some people to go and write a report. It will delay, hoping that by then people would have forgotten, because Mahdi thinks Melayu mudah lupa, So that is, I think, the case with the RCI. So if we allow that to happen, and then the problem will actually grow and fester even more. And that's why finally, I think it's incumbent, especially on Pakatan Rakyat, to reframe the whole issue and to strike a balance. There is a balance that we have to strike between setting things right, to make sure that this does not repeat again, to make sure that manipulation of citizenship in exchange for votes will never occur again in this country. Yet at the same time, we must understand that this is a problem that have extended over 40 to 50 years, and there are real people involved on the ground. And that's why it's not something that you can, there is no silver bullet to, that's my opinion, to really resolve it. And therefore, you have to take into account as well the humanitarian aspects, because there will be hundreds of thousands of families whom we have to go through and decide whether they deserve to be Malaysians, or if they do not deserve, how do we treat them? Because it's not as easy as just basically deporting them instantly like that and so on. So it's a big undertaking, and I think the challenge for Pakatan Rakyat is to go beyond the initial sentiment now and reframe the whole thing, so that I think Sabahans can see not just the citizens and original Sabahans, but even the immigrants can actually see that whatever we propose will be fair and out of humanitarian concern to them. And I think if we can do that, then we will be able to swing the debate a bit, and hopefully that will gain more traction, and with the traction on the ground, it either will affect a political change in Sabah that will allow us to focus on this, or it will galvanize into a larger opposition to BN, that it will pressure BN to respond more adequately after this. So that's my initial thought of it. I'm not a subject matter expert on this, but I think that's at least what any politician or any MPs in the Dewan Rakyat should look into the issue. Thank you very much.